Today I picked out 10 records from my collection, not in any order because I'm very bad at putting things in a definitive order, but these records I hold very specially in my heart, and I'm going to explain to you why for each one. So also, before I start, I need to know if you guys are rocking with the hair. I'm not trying to do a middle part. Um, I'm not that low in life yet, but my mom said if I don't keep my hair out of my face and style it, she's gonna cut it, like trim it, and I don't really want that to happen. So I'm trying my best here. With that out of the way though, let's start the video now. I'm gonna knock one out that is kind of obvious for a lot of record collectors nowadays, and I'm not gonna spend too much time on it. I'm gonna be brief with this one because you can find this level of glaze in every single record related video ever, probably having to do with good albums. Here's To Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick Lamar. This album, I mean, obviously Kendrick's magnum opus, although I will say, Damn is very slept on. It doesn't hold a candle to this, but I do think it's probably his second best. Point is, this combines some of the best moments of music or best elements of music and puts it all into one record, and I just think it I've said this before, but in terms of music, just in general, across all genres, because this combines a good handful of them, it doesn't get much better than this. And that's all I'm gonna say for this very highly acclaimed album. Alright, now let's get into the more personal reasons. So this next one here is Bob Dylan's Bringing It All Back Home. This is, I believe, his first album where he went electric. And the reason why I have this in my favorites video is because I think is it the second side of this album? Yeah, I'd say the second side of this album is really what had a really big influence on my early songwriting stages back in like 6th grade. I was obsessed with Bob Dylan in 6th grade, and especially the songs like It's Alright Ma, It's All Over Now Baby Blue, Mr. Tambourine Man. Mr. Tambourine Man made me like confident in my singing, which I'm not so much anymore. But what really special for this album is like songs like It's Alright Ma, where the songwriting and the rhyming and just like the overall just mastery of lyrics going on in this album is what really inspired me to pick up my pen and start writing songs myself. Originally in this style, I did a lot of songs. I wrote a lot of songs in the style of this album, but mainly Highway 61 Revisited. I did a lot of songs in the style of Desolation Row. If I had that record on vinyl, that would definitely be on this list. But It's Alright Ma was definitely a big factor in my early rhyming schemes. In just, not in rap, but like in just playing on the guitar and writing a song and telling a story and using what's it called, the stuff they preach about in ELA class, what's literary elements, is that what it's called, like metaphor, simile, all that stuff. This album, especially the second side, was a huge stepping stone in that, so I have to give props to this record. Next up, this is the Jimi Hendrix Rainbow Bridge soundtrack. If you've seen my first ever video on this channel, my luckiest vinyl find or whatever it's called, you would know how stoked I was to get this because it was $2 and it is pretty rare from what I've seen on the internet. And I listened to it when I got home from that experience. No pun intended. And I loved the guitar playing on this record. I believe it's pronounced Polygat. Polygat. So, I mean, I dream of being as good of a guitar player as Jimi Hendrix is. He makes his guitar like do the most astronomical things on this record and a lot of his other records, but I mean, it really sounds great on this soundtrack that he has going on in here, and I just think it's really fun to listen to. Really nice solos going on here. Highly recommend this album if you haven't heard of it. My dad hasn't heard of it. Not many people these days, especially people who are just now getting put onto Jimi Hendrix, are aware of this album, and I wasn't. And I have been a fan for quite a few years, and I picked this up, and I was amazed. So this was a great addition to my collection. Next up is Men at Work's Business as Usual. The reason why I have this here is mainly because of the feel of this album. Especially, now, it starts with Who Can It Be Now, but as the album goes on, you kind of get into this almost nocturnal feeling. And what I mean by that is this album makes me feel like I am driving alone in the middle of the night on a highway. And especially like songs like, and like I said, it starts with Who Can It Be Now, but if you hear songs like people just, that was my fan, people just love to play with words, those kind of songs, especially the ones with the saxophone going on there. I can almost like see like the street lights above me, just like, you know how like when you're driving at night in a highway and you see the lights go back and forth and not back and forth, but like the lights go through your car, and it's just a really nice feeling, and it brings me back to being 4 years old and being in the back of my mom's car and trying to fall asleep at night, and Locked Out of Heaven by Bruno Mars is playing on the radio because that's what was huge at the time, and the street lights, and just this record brings me back to that, and that's why I am so glad that it's in my collection. All right, I'm gonna do a double kill here. So I try to keep it to one record per artist. With this, I usually only have one record per artist in my collection at this point, but I could not resist putting these two records on this list. That is the back, but it's the same picture. And there's different reasons for each one. So I'm gonna do Dark Side first because very, very famous album. I think, I could be wrong, but I think this is the one album I have listened to the most out of any album I've ever heard ever. I've heard this album all the way through. I don't even want to know how many. Like, it's past 15 at this point. It's past like. It's because it's one of those albums where like once you put it on, you don't want to turn it off. That's how great of an experience this record is, and that pretty much sums it up. So there you go. That's Dark Side of the Moon. Definitely, it's almost like T-Pab in the sense where anything I say about it, I mean, you can hear it elsewhere. Very highly acclaimed album, and for very good reason. On to Wish You Were Here, another one of those albums, but the reason why I hold this is for two very personal reasons. The first one, I'll cover briefly. The day my grandmother passed away, I was on my way to a record shop. My mom had picked me up from her house. So I was at my grandmother's house that whole weekend where she was in the hospital. And my dad was usually there, but at that day, it was a Sunday, he was at work. And my mom came to pick me up that Sunday because I usually stay the weekend there. And on the way and I told her like, can we stop at the record shop, because this weekend has been pretty heavy. And she was like, okay. So we're driving to the record shop on the way back home, which is in the area. And that was when we got the phone call that my grandmother had passed away. And when I walked in, I still went into the record shop because that was the only thing I wanted to do at that point. And the first song I hear when I walk into the store is Wish You Were Here. And I don't know why, but that really struck a chord with me. So, because I think, now that I'm thinking about it, I tried playing that song for her one time because I thought it was, I think I was either like trying to see if she recognized it or I don't know, but that was just a really nice moment for me. sad, but I mean, it was, you know, it was, yeah. The second reason is because that same song, Wish You Were Here, is the very first song I learned how to play on guitar. I have a video of me somewhere, like first starting to learn it. Sounds absolutely abysmal, but still very special to me because it was the first one. Because I think it was actually the song that made me want to play guitar. I remember fiddling with my dad's guitar and trying to do the opening, dun, 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 and failing miserably because I didn't know how to work my fingers. But once I got the hang of it, that was the riff that I played nonstop. Dun, 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 dun. That was my first riff, first song that I ever learned. So, really special song to me. But also the rest of the record is just incredible. I do think Welcome to the Machine is very slept on. Have a Cigar, and of course Shine On You Crazy Diamond, which has an absolutely, I don't know how to describe, cinematic. That's the word, cinematic. That's how I describe Shine On You Crazy Diamond, both parts of it. Really, really cool stuff. Okay. Next up, Loveless by My Bloody Valentine. This is a, what's the word? Pinnacle of shoegaze. And the reason I got this was because this was my first, how do I describe it? My first venture into something outside of the typical mainstream. And I'm by no means calling Loveless underground because especially in the last year or so, it has been gaining a lot of popularity. And even before then, it was beloved by a lot of people. But before I discovered this album, particularly the song When You Sleep, which is one of those songs where it doesn't get old to me. I've heard it like thousands of times and I still love it each time. The reason, what was I saying? What I was saying was, before I discovered that song, When You Sleep, and then eventually decided to look into the rest of the album because I love that song so much, I was really into like classic rock. But when I say classic rock, I mean like Led Zeppelin, Beatles, Rolling Stones, bands you know all about. And I think I was in art class, 6th grade, and I was, you know how, I don't know if people listen to music on like the actual YouTube website anymore, but when you listen to a song, usually like on the side it shows you songs similar to that song. And I guess I was listening to, I don't know, probably some like Cranberries or something, one of those more mainstream bands, and When You Sleep appeared on there, and I really love the album cover. I still do. This is one of my favorite album covers of all time. I have an insert from the record up top that kind of looks like it. Love it. And I clicked on it, clicked on the song, absolutely loved it. Looked into the rest of the album, loved that. But this was one of those first discoveries that, you know, when I asked my friends about it, that, you know, have you heard of this? Nobody does. And of course, those are just the people I hang around, the people I know, because I know, especially on the internet nowadays, this is a very well-known record. But this is one of those first finds that really got me into, you know, there's other bands other than Beatles, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, my favorite band at the time. And this was a huge stepping stone in the sense that once I started listening to this, I looked for albums and artists similar to it, and soon I was just in the underground shoegaze scene, and I was just discovering artists that had, I don't know, like 2,000 monthly listeners, and it was just a really huge helping hand out of the typical rock, but also just like the typical like music in general. Like it got me out of that mainstream. Like you know what I'm saying. So I have to give props to this album for that. It's also an insanely comforting album for me. Not only the song When You Sleep, obviously. Sometimes, Loomer. Just this whole album feels like you just got a new fluffy blanket and White Elephant, and you get home and you take the cardboard wrapping around it off, and you put it on. And you almost fall asleep right there on the spot. Like it's just that's what this album feels like. Highly recommend if you haven't heard of it. That's Loveless. Also got me more innovative with my guitar playing, but yeah. Here's one I probably should have covered earlier, but here's Igor, Tyler the Creator. And the reason why I love this one so much is because I remember, and I'm pretty sure I've told this story before in another video, but I'll tell it again because I love going back on it. I was 10 years old, 2020, right before COVID hit, January, Grammys are on, and I had only known Tyler the Creator because of Earthquake, because at this point I'm still very young and I'm only listening to like radio hits and like weird electronic music, so I'd only heard of Earthquake at this point, right? Which is on this album. And he performs that song on the Grammys, but when I was watching, he also did the song New Magic Wand. And if you have never seen his performance of that song, I highly recommend you search up 2020 Grammys New Magic Wand performance, because at that point I had never in my life seen something like that performance. And I mean, it's in terms of like, if you want to get into crazy, outlandish stage presences, I mean, that's the tip of the iceberg. But at that point, that was something new to me. Not only that, but the music was incredible. And those two, something new, something incredible that never heard before, never seen before. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And so this is one of those albums that kind of brought me out of top 40 radio and realized, there's other artists out there. That's the beautiful thing about music. There is so much of it. And it sounds hilarious saying that because it's such an understatement. And once you start discovering all these new artists and you're discovering all these new songs that, you've never even heard before, but you love once you hear them. I mean, it's just, that's what I love about music, among other things that I could do a whole 2-hour essay on. But this record, and of course later on in life, when I actually went and listened to the other songs on this album, I loved it. It's just pretty close to perfect album. I don't like calling albums perfect because that's pretty much impossible. But this is just, I will say, funny story about this album though. When I first heard it all the way through, like I sat down and I listened to it all the way through, I thought Are We Still Friends was the worst song on the album. Which I don't like to talk about because it's insanely stupid and I am ashamed of it. But of course the more I listen to it, the more I love it. But the first time I heard it, I thought it was filler. I was like, what is the point of the song? The story is already wrapped up. I don't know. We don't talk about that. Funnier story, I used to, and back in 6th part of 7th grade, I'd like this fan to turn back on. There we go. When I was in 6th, 7th grade, I would crank my headphones all the way up and pretend I was Tyler performing New Magic Wand. Fucking smoke machines were going off. I was on stage, flames were going up. And I still do that, not to that song, but I still do that because I know I'm gonna be there one day. But that song, to me, New Magic Wand it's still such an experience. And if you are older or you haven't heard that song, or let alone this album, please do yourself a favor. I am envious of you that you get to hear this for the first time, just like I did. So that is why I have Igor by Tyler. In here. We got 2 more. Never mind. Here's Van Morrison, Moon. I'm holding that right. Van Morrison's Moon Dance. The reason why I have this is because this has easily the best side 1 I have ever seen in my entire life. I don't know if it'll let you read that, but Into the Mystic, Moon Dance, Crazy Love stuff. So amazing. So amazing. I actually think I had a dream about playing this album. Like putting this album on a turntable and playing it and loving it. In a dream. I don't know. It was weird. It was a good dream. But yeah, what this album makes me feel like? It makes me feel like I am a 70-year-old woman who lives like in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by greenery and trees, and she has a garden in the backyard, she's playing this album on repeat. Her only form of like connection to the outside world is a radio, but she just relies on her records to keep her company, and that is just, I like that feeling. So I have to give props to this album. I was so stoked to get it on vinyl, have it physically. That's why it's on here. Great stuff on here. Really nice sounding music. For the last 10th record I have on here, The Beatles' Revolver. Now you may be wondering, why didn't you pick Abbey Road, Sgt. Pepper's? I mean, there are. I know there's a lot of people who would agree with me that this is a great album, but the reason why is because this album changed my life. I'm gonna rephrase that. A song on this album changed my life. Eleanor Rigby. This is like the craziest, like, what's it called? The butterfly effect. That one, that effect where like if something didn't happen, how different things would have been. Like if one small thing hadn't happened, how different things would have been. That's like the song Eleanor Rigby on this record. That is my butterfly effect, because I don't believe I would have gotten into music to the extent that I have now. Maybe not, probably not, but not as soon as I did, and definitely not to the depth that I did without this song. I would not have, you know, it's hard to say, but the reason why I'm saying this is because I was scrolling on TikTok one day in 2021, very early 2021, like January, February 2021. And I saw an edit of this, like, you know, an edit, like, you know, an edit of a character does a bunch of, yeah, with a song over it. I saw an edit of a character, I can't remember what it was. I'll remember one of these, I just remember the song because of it. And the song was Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles. It was like a slowed down version of it, but it was Eleanor Rigby. It was like the chorus or the hook, whatever it's called, of Eleanor Rigby. It was slowed down, and I never heard anything like it before, and I absolutely loved it. That, you know, oh, look at all the lonely people, that part. Slow down. Now, if you haven't heard that song, Slow Down, it's a more eerie feeling. Not that the song isn't eerie, because it kind of is, but when I heard that, I did my research to figure out what the song was, pulled it up, and I started listening to the rest of the Beatles, because key part that I tend to leave like key parts out of stories, but key part of the story is that before this, I only listened to Billie Eilish. No shade to her, still love her, got her merch and everything, but Billie Eilish and weird electronic music, radio hits, that's about it. Oh, and the Chainsmokers, sorry. So that's the big four right there. That at the time, I hear Eleanor Rigby, I look into it, start listening to the rest. That's when I get into the Beatles, right? That's when I get into. That's when I get into them, right? I tell my dad that I start listening to the Beatles. He starts talking about a bunch of other bands. I start to listen to those bands. That begins my classic rock phase. Then after classic rock, it was MF Doom, and then I started getting into rap, and the rest is history. Point being that this record sparked my curiosity, I believe, in music, because I think I'm on a different level, and I know I'm gonna sound very pretentious saying this, but I feel like at this point I'm on a different level than somebody who only listens to top 40 radio, like in terms of music and just like overall taste range. I know I'm sounding so insanely pretentious. My mouth is getting dry, but I think you know what I'm saying. Like I was at a way lower level of I think the word is musical interest because at that point I hadn't wanted to play instruments. I didn't want to do any of that. At that point I wanted to be an author. And now look at me now. I want to be a musician. I want to be a TV producer, but the main thing is musician. And I think that when I heard Eleanor Rigby and all that stuff followed, that was what really tapped in because when I started listening to other Beatles songs, and then when I started listening to bands similar to the Beatles, that's when I heard Pink Floyd and like Wish You Were Here. That's when wanted to start playing guitar. That's when I wanted to start writing songs. That's when I started like all these things. It's just such an insane domino effect, and I can only thank Eleanor Rigby for that. And the rest of the album is great too. I really like what's it called? Good Day Sunshine, Yellow Summer. I forgot Yellow Submarine's on this album. I keep thinking it's on freaking they have an album called Yellow Submarine. I keep forgetting that's originally on here. Love Yellow Submarine. I think I fell asleep to it one time and it was #1 on my Spotify Wrapped. But I mean, I couldn't even complain because that's a great song too. But yeah, thank you, Revolver. And that is all I got for you guys today. Hope you enjoyed. I'm gonna go brush my teeth again because, like I said, my mouth is insanely dry from being so. Yeah. Thanks for watching.